There it goes. Thank you, everyone, for holding with us. The time is now 6:04, and I will call to order this hybrid public meeting. It is June 5th, 2024. My name is Elaine Thatcher, and I am the Vice Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. Regular meetings and public hearings of the Clark County Historic Preservation Commission are held in a hybrid form, with both in-person and virtual participation options for commissioners, staff, and the public. This will allow for safe participation by commission members, staff, and any citizens interested in attending. For those of you joining remotely via computer, you should be able to see tonight's meeting agenda on your screen. If you can't see the screen and have joined by phone only, I will be announcing the agenda items as we move through the meeting topics. Members of the public and applicants who have joined remotely are attendees. Other event participants cannot hear your audio unless you are acknowledged by the commission chair, vice chair, staff, and are unmuted. This evening's agenda is planned as follows: roll call and introduction, public comment for subjects other than public hearings on this meeting's agenda, as there will be specific public comment periods as part of hearings, letter of support requested from the Historic Trust, advisory review for Providence Academy Sacred Heart landscape and tree plan updates, Schofield Building redevelopment proposal, IBR Section 106 programmatic agreement updates, Heritage Farm updates, commission announcements and events, subcommittee updates and announcements, for good of the order, and adjournment. We will now have a roll call of Historic Preservation Commission members who are present for this meeting. Commission members, please say "I'm here" after I call your name. Ann Bader.
Here.
Morgan Fraser.
Here.
Andy Gregg, who is absent. Heidi Mandler-Huft is on leave. I am Elaine Thatcher. John Zingali.
Here.
Donna, thank you. And Julie Bond is absent. Next, we will move on to public comment. We will now take public comment on any items outside of public hearing items. We will begin with attendees in the room, if any. Please approach the microphone if you would like to make a comment. Excellent. We will start with the lovely individual in the animal skin, and then we'll next move on to the individual in the gray shrug.
And quick clarification that public comment is not being held for the sustainability project, the Heritage Farm.
I do not believe that that is a hearing, no.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to clarify with, it's not a hearing, so public comment is now, correct?
Oh, it's just a presentation. So now would be the time.
Not a hearing, so yes.
I'm informational.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. My name is Lisa Beatat. If the Heritage Farm Sustainability Project is about diversity, I would like to speak to the diversity of the people who reside in Marble Mount Cemetery, or better known as the Old Poor Farm Cemetery or the 78th Street Heritage Farm. On June 16, 1898, the Vancouver Independent said that a representative of the Independent called at the Poor Farm one day this week and found everything in excellent shape. The county has about 100 acres, of which about 7 are under cultivation, and about 17 acres more are slashed and could be raised to winter a cow or a team now on the farm. Mr. and Mrs. John Eddings are now in charge of the farm, and it is evident they are the right people in the right place. Mr. Eddings has the garden in fine order and will raise enough vegetables for use of the persons there. He has also built a wagon shed to take care of the wagon, which former superintendents have allowed to stand out in the weather until it was all but ruined. The house, which has been built at a cost to the county of about $3,000, is kept very clean and is certainly a comfortable home for the 16 persons there. There's a concrete stone placed under a tree at the space of the cemetery, not because Elias Kozer is there, but because we do not know the locations of the bodies buried there 1.5 feet under. The stone is there at the request of Elias's family, who's back east. There was an obituary that said, "Little is known about Kozer." The Columbian obituary, which spelled his name Kozer, and it was Koser, said he had relatives in the East, and the funeral home report said he had been born in Pennsylvania, but that relatives could not be reached by officials here. 3 metal markers have been located since we have begun looking for those remains, or at least to give them a presence in the history of Clark County. 2 of the markers were in the forest just outside of the cemetery proper, and 1 was about 75 feet south of the cemetery proper. There was an unidentified man who was killed by an OWR&N southbound silk train a mile south of Ridgefield near the W.W. Cook place early this morning. Nothing in the way of identification could be found in the clothing of the dead man, and since no one saw the accident, it is not known whether the accident happened while he was trying to board the train or whether he was unable to get out of the way. He is described as having the appearance of a lumberjack of about 38 years of age, weight 160 pounds, and a dark complexion. County Coroner Victor Limbar made a hurried trip to the scene of the accident this morning.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you. A logger dies in a deserted house. In a weakened condition from excess exposure, Andrew Erickson, 50-year-old logger, walked into a deserted farmhouse on the Abrams Place 1 mile southeast of Ridgefield yesterday. His dead body was found a few hours later by Frank Ryman, who was walking down the railroad track near the house and investigated when he saw a knapsack on the porch. The sheriff and coroner's office were notified, and Coroner Knapp said the man apparently died from heart failure brought on by exposure. The logger was identified by means of a bank book in one of his pockets. In the balmy days of last summer, Erickson had a small account at Madeira, California, the book showed. A pawn ticket was found in his pocket bearing the date of December 16th. His watch was pawned in Portland. Coroner Knapp said Erickson had been dead only a few hours when his body was discovered. These are just a few of the wonderful stories that I think are important to the history of Clark County, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for coming and presenting that to us, and it is something to consider. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners, staff, and guests. I'm Holly Chamberlain with the Historic Trust, and I have a few updates on our organizational activities. At Providence Academy, we're happy to note that the contract from the State Department of Commerce related to the legislative appropriation for architectural and engineering plans for the elevator installation project has been received and signed. The Heritage Capital Project Elevator Installation Project Grant application was approved for progression to Phase 2 review and is in process for submission this Friday. AV upgrades improving sound quality in the chapel have been completed. Event venue management staff have surpassed their financial stretch goal for 2024 and already have many events scheduled for 2025. The seasonal flowers planted by the Trust groundskeeper in the Sacred Heart Garden are looking very beautiful. We invite you to come by and see those. Once a month evening tours are continuing to be popular and will be continued. The help of the Volunteer Docent Corps is greatly appreciated. Over at Officers Row, repairs for the west side of the Marshall House front porch have been completed, and it is open again for rentals. Other spring and summer work has included a roof inspection at the Red Cross building, inspection and repair of all the irrigation lines, and a project to level some interior pathways on Officers Row and in the West Barracks for safety purposes. Painting prep is also underway. 2024 chimney repairs are underway, and we hope to finish that 5-year project this year. A recent power surge caused some HVAC problems, and 2 control boards were damaged. They were replaced, however, and the systems are once again fully functional. The application for next year's Biennium Heritage Capital Project of re-roofing the artillery barracks is almost done and will be submitted on Friday. In the realm of announcements, the Trust submitted its initial slate of IBR mitigation concepts in concert with comments on the first formal draft of the programmatic agreement. The comments have been shared with all cultural resource stakeholders for the IBR project to encourage collaboration. A full season of public activities are planned for the annual Summerfest, starting with a porch concert at the Howard House on June 14th at 5:30 p.m. with music by True Vibes. Summer will truly start on June 20th with a solstice observance at 6 p.m., also at the Howard House. The Officers Row Tree Tour to be presented in partnership with the City of Vancouver Urban Forestry staff on June 25th is full, but we hope to offer another next year. Picnic in the Park is planned for July 6th. Come to Officers Row for lawn games, music, and a wide variety of food and beverage treats for all ages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now take public comment from online attendees. Susan, can you please read the instructions?
If you are using a computer, tablet, or smartphone, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand. There are instructions on how to do this on the screen. Typically, the hand icon is located towards the bottom of your screen. For anyone on the telephone, please dial *3 on your phone's number panel to raise your hand. Staff will be able to see hands once they are raised and will ask to unmute you one at a time. Please note public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person in order to accommodate all speakers.
Do we have anyone?
I do not see any raised hands.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. Are there any other parties who wish to comment? Seeing none, this concludes the general public comment portion of this meeting. We will now move on to new business. The first item is a request from the Historic Trust for the HPC to provide a letter of support for a grant requesting for the Artillery Barracks re-roof project. Holly Chamberlain is here to discuss this item and to answer any questions. Holly?
Thank you very much. Yes, so you have all had a chance to review the draft letter, and this is something that comes around every 2 years for the Heritage Capital Project funding that's available from the state of Washington. And we'd certainly welcome your support again for this city project in the West Barracks, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have just a few, if that's all right. The first one was, when was the last time that the roof was updated or had maintenance done on it?
Oh, well, the maintenance is ongoing. Currently, what our staff has determined is that maintenance is no longer cost effective because there are some underlying problems with the roof that need to be addressed. The roof was last replaced 10 years ago.
Okay. And as you said, maintenance is no longer cost effective for it. Are there leaks coming through? Does it need new beamings? Information like that?
There have been some leaks, and so again, they have been repaired so far, but it needs a complete redo now.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? John?
No, I do not.
Thank you, John. Excellent. Is there any discussion that we would like to have regarding the letter?
No, I'm in full support of writing and sending the letter.
Excellent. I also agree with full support. So I will take a motion on full support of the letter of support.
I will make a motion to...
thank you, right. Not my job this week.
I will make a motion to approve the letter of support for the roof replacement.
Second.
Excellent. So we have a motion and a second. The motion has passed, and we will get that letter signed and sent to you.
Thank you very much for your help.
Did you get John's vote?
All right, sorry. John?
Sorry, this is some bad delay. Yes, I approve.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
All right. Next, Keith Jones from the City of Vancouver is here to present an advisory review for an update to the Providence Academy Sacred Heart Landscape Tree Plan. Keith?
And Keith,
Good evening.
before you start, there's several attachments, so let me know what you want as you want them.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Well, good evening. I'm Keith Jones. I'm a senior planner with the City of Vancouver. And to my right is Charles Rays, the City Urban Forester. And just before we begin, Tricia Jutmeyer from the City Attorney's Office is just going to give a brief statement about the process tonight.
Excellent. And if I heard earlier, Trish is joining us remotely, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Trish, if you would like to go, you have the floor.
Thank you. Given that so my name is Trisha Jettemeyer. I'm an assistant city attorney for the city of Vancouver. Given that advisory heritage overlay district consultations don't come before the commission very often, the city would like to refresh the commission's memory on their duty, which is to serve in an advisory role pursuant to VMC 17.39.040 sub D sub 5 and VMC 20.510.030 sub A. The city's planning official consults with you here through its presentation to the commission and related reports. Following the city's presentation, the commission may deliberate on the city's recommendations and determine whether the commission would desire any amendments to the city's report. Once that determination has been made, a commission member will make a motion, which must be seconded, to either implement the recommendations of the report or to do so with amendments. Once approved by majority vote, that will be recorded in the minutes, which the city will take under consideration, although the ultimate determination of whether the construction meets the intents, purposes, and requirements stated in the Heritage Overlay District Ordinance lies with the planning official. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tricia.
Okay, thank you. Bart, if you could, bring up Exhibit 4, which is the existing conditions plan, tree plan. So this was before the commission. I believe it was March of 2023. So the scope of the project is to enhance and redo the landscaping, including the Sacred Heart, which the commission is familiar with. It's in the front of the Academy along Evergreen, and it's really between where the Aegis Projects parking lot is located to the west, to the left, and then to the right is the surface parking lot that the Historic Trust just recently upgraded. And that was presented to the commission, and the commission's recommendation to staff was there were trees that were proposed by the applicant for removal, and it was the recommendation that, and those included, so at the bottom of the screen there's 7 street trees, that those be retained, and then there are 2 oak trees that are to the right of the screen. They're in blue, kind of the lower right-hand side. There's I believe it's a English oak and a red oak, and then a silver maple, which is up into the right-hand corner. Those be retained, and then the holly trees, which are considered an invasive species, those would be removed. But really the purpose of being here tonight really has to do with the large cedar trees that are located in front of the Academy. So over the past year, there's been quite a bit of discussion between the Historic Trust and staff about these trees. The Historic Trust has retained an arborist who's been in communication with the Urban Forestry Department. And as we've looked closer at this, it's our recommendation or what we're presenting tonight is to remove those trees really due to climate stress that's affecting the years, and then because of the need to restore the Sacred Heart area as well as some of the land in that area that could have adverse impacts to the root zone and would put those trees into decline. So that's really the purpose of tonight, is to present this updated proposal and the proposal to remove those trees. And Charles is here too and can talk more in depth about what the believed impacts to those trees would be. So that's really it for tonight. So we're just looking for some input on this new proposal. And then also the Historic Trust does have a presentation that they would like to make tonight as well about the overall design concept.
Okay, Charles.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Charles Ray, Urban Forester with City of Vancouver, and here to talk about the trees. I think the one thing that has changed since the last time we were here is just the Sacred Heart being an archaeological site within itself, and the goal of restoring that. I think when we were here prior, I was looking at this as more of a landscape project, not necessarily restoring an archaeological site. With restoring the Sacred Heart, as you can see with the position of the two trees and the path that goes through those two trees, those root systems are within that area. And so any activity within that to restore the Sacred Heart would impact those roots, causing those trees to decline. And so that's where long-term, with that project, those trees may only survive another 5 years after that project is complete due to the root impacts.
And then, so for mitigation for the removal of those trees, so Bart, if you could bring up attachment 3, please. So the trees that the trust is planning to, or is proposed to plant, some shade trees, and that would include 8 shade trees, and those are the triangles, and they're the larger circles on the map. And those are going to be 3.5-inch caliper, and then they're proposing some smaller shade trees. There's 4 of those that are in a line kind of in the middle of the site. So there'll be 12 shade trees. They're proposing, it would be based on what's available in nursery stock at the time, but either European hornbeam, red oak, or sunset maple. And then again, the existing English oak, the existing red oak, and as well as all of the street trees would be retained. But they would then, be putting in these additional trees to add shade back to the site, which wasn't on their plan from last year.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the applicant?
I just have a question. The entire Providence Academy is an archaeological site, so I'm unsure what you mean by the Sacred Heart is an archaeological site on its own, because the entire place is an archaeological site. So can you elaborate on what you're trying to really say there?
So I was aware that it was a historical site. I think when the trust came back to the city, I was really asking what's changed from our determination in March. And from that standpoint, they informed me that it was an archaeological site, that the restoration of that Sacred Heart, and that the goal was to restore the Sacred Heart. So I looked at it just like if we got a request to remove a tree that was damaging a historic building, we would have allowed the tree to be removed to save the building or to restore that building that was being damaged by the tree. So I started looking at it from a different perspective.
Right, because it's a subsurface site, so it's under the ground. So actually removing the trees actually damages the site as an archaeological site. So that's why I'm asking. It doesn't really make any sense. As a historic feature of Providence Academy, it makes a complete sense. But as the archaeological component, that's not the archaeological component. The archaeological component is under the ground in the dirt. And we have yet to even see that report here of any of the testing and things that have gone on. So I'm just a little, I'm just asking you because I read everything so well, and I was like, what do they mean? And then I went on the DAP and I read the entire site form, which I didn't share because it's confidential information.
So as a non-archaeological or historic person, that was my take.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Any additional questions?
Well, so maybe that question should be answered by someone from the trust instead of a guy.
Yeah, there'll be a follow-up question after their break.
John has a question?
Yes, and so I just want to make sure I'm clear. The goal would be to restore this heart that's in the middle that has this walkway pathway. And in order to do that, you're saying that it will damage the roots to the red cedars, those beautiful trees there, and that they would possibly last 5 years. And then to add shade or add trees in, there's an additional 8 trees going in after those 2 or so come out. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the total would be 8 larger 3.5-inch caliper and 4 smaller 2.5-inch caliper trees. So 12 total would be the amount replanted, plus some more ornamental trees around the landscape feature they have further away from the Sacred Heart.
And Keith, when you're
But the-
talking about diameter, is that the planting, when you plant it? That's the diameter when it's planted, correct?
Correct,
Thank
correct.
Sorry, John.
That's okay. But you would not be replanting the red cedar. We would be taking that type of tree out completely, basically. Correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
All right, so from what I'm hearing, I'm also working through this in my mind. In looking to maintain the historical feature of the Sacred Heart.
To restore it.
Restore it, yes. That would damage and likely kill the trees around it in the next 5 years. And then removing those historic trees, which would dig up the archaeological site, and planting more trees in the archaeological site? This what I'm...
Yeah, all that will happen under a permit, I'm sure. The state
Yeah.
would never let that happen without a permit.
Yep.
So we don't have to worry about that, but yeah.
I'm just working the steps through. Excellent. Would we like to hold a discussion on this item?
I'd like to hear the applicant's presentation, because I think that they'll have more information
Yes.
than the information just about the trees themselves.
Apologies, I got my bullet points out of order.
Okay.
Bart, could you? Okay, great. Could you bring up applicant, I think it was applicant presentation there at the bottom? Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you. We know you have many questions. We will get there. But thank you for the opportunity to present.
Temple, can you introduce yourself?
I am Temple Lentz, the President and CEO of the Historic Trust, and here with Holly Chamberlain, our Director of Historic Preservation, who you hear from very frequently. And thank you, Keith and Charles, for a good overview. We'll revisit a few of the points and be available for more questions. We also have our project architect, Stephen Elbeck, who's available online for some other questions. For some folks who weren't on the commission at the time or weren't in attendance for the original meeting last year, we did want to share the original plan. So if we could go to the next slide, you can see the difference between the plans. So looking at the plan that we presented last year, you can see a little bit of the difference. We were just looking at the illustrative plan that we have currently. So you can see some of the trees that are missing. Some of the trees that we plan to retain around the perimeter are not there. And over on the left side, you can see some of the trees in the rows along the far left side and then sort of in the middle were originally intended to be columnar trees. And then you'll see when we come back to the current plan, because of the request for more shade, we have made them both larger caliper trees, but also more shade trees. So they will both be larger, fuller shade trees, and they will be larger caliper, more mature when they go in. And the decorative trees in the middle there will also be larger caliper, more robust shade trees as well. And then taking out the red cedars there in the middle. I'll ask Holly to speak to the archaeological bit in just a moment, but also want to speak to the trees aren't historic. They were not planted originally. They weren't there at the beginning. They're not heritage trees.
How old are they?
We don't know, but they don't appear in historic images. And because of their sighting, they appear to be volunteers.
But 50 years is historic, so it's really hard for me to not think those aren't 50 years. I mean, they're not original to the building, and they're not original to the period.
Right, but they also, and so they're not contributing to the site historically, from our perspective, as far as trying to
preserve and restore and illuminate the site when we talk about restoring the Sacred Heart and what we're trying to do in the preservation of the Academy. They're not contributing to that work that we're trying to do. Holly, if you would like to talk a little bit about the archaeological site, that would be.
Sure. As Morgan pointed out, yes, the entire site is, at the Academy, is a designated archaeological site. We have done a significant amount of testing on the site. That report is not yet done by our consultants. They found so many artifacts. It is taking them a very long time to process all of those and get them ready for final disposition at the Burke Museum in Seattle. I don't currently have an update on when that report will be available, but they're continuing to work on it. So other archaeological aspects are that we know that the site originally had 3 concentric hearts. You probably saw the historic photograph that Temple had on display earlier. And we have some written information about some of the original plants and whatnot. But our long-term intent would be to do some additional work to return the Sacred Heart Garden to a more original appearance, include potentially some of the original plantings. And in the meantime, the immediate future calls for it to have some resurfacing done, as well as the tree removal. We're trying to make the entire landscape universally accessible. Currently, the asphalt covering the pathway is very deteriorated and lots and lots of tripping hazards there. And we also want to try to integrate it with the existing north-south pathway and retain that. So there's a lot of work to be done in the future, but right now what we're trying to do is prevent any further damage to the garden, and we would anticipate at this point, we're still in consultation about this, removing the trees down to ground level as opposed to doing any stump grinding or anything of that sort. And as Morgan noted, we already have our permit in place, and all of the monitoring will be done as it has been with the whole project.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Did you have more? Yeah. Just a little bit more. If you could go to the next slide, please, and we won't stay here very long. We're not going to read that to you. This is actually also in our submission, but we did do a lot of consultation with many individuals, many academics about the history of the site, of the region, to learn more about both the Sacred Heart and the history of the area, trying to learn more about the importance of the site, and then also about the climate stress on the trees. That really has been one of the turning points for us in removing the red cedars. We do take it very seriously. We regret the need to remove any of the trees, but that lifespan for the trees is not just about the removal of the roots, but about the climate stress they're already under. And it is visible now if you go look at the trees physically today. They are in much worse condition than they were even a year ago. We're very concerned about their lifespan, and we would much, much prefer to take them down in a controlled way when we can know how they're going to come down and not into the building or onto people or rip out, have the roots rip out. We really, we're very, very concerned about that because of our commitment to preserve the site and the building and honor the donors, many of whom are members of this community who have donated to preserve this building. As Keith showed in his presentation, and as you have in your materials, 11 trees are going to be removed. 3 western red cedars, 1 red oak, and 7 hollies, which are considered invasive by the City of Vancouver. Wood from the removed trees will be offered to the Friends of the Carpenter for use in their charitable woodworking projects. And we have a history of doing that already. We have donated wood from maple on the reserve site that did have to be removed to Friends of the Carpenter, and they were able to use it. And we were grateful that they were, and we're going to continue that relationship, we hope. Some other changes, we can go to the next slide. Some other changes since the last version include the red oak at the southeastern corner of the Sacred Heart Garden will be retained. The 2 oak trees on the eastern side will also be kept. And for the mitigation and the landscape design purposes, 20 new climate-forward shade trees will be planted. And as I said earlier, in the earlier version, many of those trees were columnar, and these have been changed to the fuller shade trees, and they'll start at a larger caliper size to be more mature more quickly. And also, per direction from the city, the existing southernmost trees, an English oak and a red oak, will be pruned and shaped by a certified arborist to enhance their health. And then we did include some views, some renderings of the new site, and we can just roll through those. You did have them in your materials, the garden. And then next slide, please. The fuller shade trees. It will be a much cooler, a much more welcoming space with more shade. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think we have one more. Maybe that's it. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. We really do appreciate the opportunity. And any more questions?
I want to say thank you because I can tell that you guys have taken a lot of time and effort, and you listened to a lot of our concerns from last year, and you really addressed them, and I really want to say thank you for that. I'm not 100% confident in the archaeological site at this time. I'm not sure if as an archaeologist, I can't stand constant monitoring, but you know, what is the overall plan for the academy, you know, for the constant ground disturbance? I would think that, you know, I was in front of the academy today, and if I was going to take out those trees, and I was, you know, I saw the rendering, and there's not much of what the circle is now. I mean, it's going to be the same shape and everything, but it's not going to be the same materials. Have you thought about putting a bunch of fill on there?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by fill?
Fill material to stop digging into the archaeological site and disturbing the materials underneath.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what mitigation factors besides constant monitoring do you guys have in place for the rest of the academy's life? So this means, like, every time a tree comes out, every time you want to dig out a tree and put in a new tree. You know, a lot of times in my work, I recommend that people think about putting a layer of fill. It's flat, it's hard, it's terrible. I mean, the academy's beautiful, but right there, right now, needs a lot of help. And if you were going to take out the trees, why not bring in a bunch of fill and kind of give that site some preservation underground instead of constantly digging into it? So, just a suggestion.
Thank you.
And then
John's raising his hand.
I just have a point of clarification. So the trees would be cut down, but not remove the root system. So we would not be digging out that and disturbing the archaeological site, correct? And then the second one is for the trees that are being removed, we are, or you are planning on planting, I think Temple said 20 new trees, and we're removing 17, I believe is what the numbers were.
11, I believe.
Removing 11, planting 20.
Thank you. And then the red cedars there will be a stump there, and then the wood will be donated to the carpenter for later use.
We don't anticipate that there will be a stump. The plan is to take the trees down to ground level, and the above ground wood would be donated to Friends of the Carpenter.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My knowledge, you can take it down to the ground and just put a bunch of holes in it and let it do its thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming and presenting this. I personally really appreciate it, and I know the rest of us do too. Do we have any discussion on this item? Don't see a hand from John. All right. If there is no further discussion, I'll take a motion on the request.
So I guess I would move that we approve of the revised plan for the landscaping of the Sacred Heart and the adjacent garden as presented by the trust.
And I will second that motion with the addendum that you consider future impacts to the archaeological site in front of the academy.
Sorry, writing.
Susan will get it.
Yep, you guys are good.
Excellent. So now that we have a motion, one motion and approved, I'll take a roll call vote for the motion as presented and amended.
I think you'd need to get the amended motion.
Oh, I have to
voted.
say it out loud?
It's fine.
Yeah.
I will second the motion as amended by Morgan.
It was as presented by staff, but with the addition of archaeological.
With the condition of just consideration for the buried archaeological site.
Consideration.
Yeah, I don't expect them to move mountains, but it would be a really good idea to think about the long-term impacts of putting a garden there and the constant gardening and the constant digging up of artifacts.
So the motion, just so we're clear, then would be consideration of the long-term effects
On the
of ground disturbance on archaeological
Correct.
resources.
Correct.
Excellent. And then Jan seconded.
So I'm fine with the amended motion.
Okay. Fine with the amended motion, amended. I appreciate everyone holding with me. This is my first time being in this chair. All right. Is it now safe to make a roll call, or do we need the amendment seconded?
Ask for discussion on the amended motion. If there's none, then we can call for a vote.
All right. Is there a discussion on the amendment to the motion?
No.
Nope. All right. So now that there is not a discussion to the amended motion, I will now take a roll call vote on the motion. Jan Bader?
Aye.
Morgan Fraser?
Aye.
John Zingali?
Aye.
And Elaine Thatcher? Aye. The motion has passed. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mark. My brain doesn't want to say your last name, Mark. I'm sorry. Mark Person from the City of Vancouver is here to request for HPC input and comment on proposed future development plans for the Schofield Building in downtown Vancouver. When you're ready, Mark.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I did prepare a memo, Mark Person, the Senior Planner with the City of Vancouver, for you tonight to discuss the Schofield Building at 6th and Main. I did prepare a memo for tonight's discussion. Earlier this year, staff received a pre-application submittal for redevelopment of the Schofield site at 6th and Main, and the applicant is here tonight and would like some early feedback from the group. I outlined two potential scenarios in this memo: the demolition process, and then the new construction and alteration process. So let me back up a little bit, because this site is within the heritage overlay, new construction and alterations need to come before this group, just like we heard about the Sacred Heart with the Academy. And then demolition needs to come before this group, again, because it is on the Heritage Register. And as Commissioner Fraser pointed out, the building has been deemed potentially eligible, and
it's been determined eligible by the Washington State Department of Archaeology.
Correct, and that I pulled that right from 510, Commissioner Fraser. That's why I say potentially eligible in my documentation.
Oh, well, as soon as the state historian stamps it, it has been determined.
Great. Either way, it needs to come before this group for demolition. So with that, if there's any procedural questions, I'm happy to answer those, but I'm hoping to reserve most of the time for the applicant to make their presentation.
Wonderful. Is there a representative for the applicant here tonight? Awesome. Please come and join us.
Hello, my name is Ryan Wilson. I'm with Wilson Architects. So we are going to be discussing the Schofield block today.
And you're...
Oh, sorry. I'm Michael Asheris. I'm a partner at Schofield Properties.
Could you spell your name?
Yes, it's very long. It's Michael, and then my last name is A as in Apple, S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, H as in Harry, I as in Ice, E as in Elephant, R as in Rick, I as in Ice, and S as in Sam.
Thank you. And if you guys could both make sure you speak into the mics, they're good, but you have to be close to them. Thank you.
All right, you can proceed to the next slide. I'll start. My hunch is most everyone is familiar with this block, but I'll do a quick overview. The Schofield block consists of 3 buildings, all constructed by Edward and Mary Schofield. Building 1 there, which is the 6th and Main site, was the first of the 3 buildings constructed and housed a clothing store on the ground floor and the Schofield family residence on the 2nd floor. Building 2 on the map there was constructed second, likely after the death of Edward's parents and after his marriage to Mary. Edward and Mary were involved in a number of businesses as well as being active members of the community. Building 2 likely provided office and workspaces for Ed and Mary's various activities, but it's most known as being Padden's General Store on Main Street. Building 3 is the small one there. It's the last of the buildings constructed on the site and appears to have been a bank originally. By 1911, all 3 buildings were referred to as the Schofield block. The remaining 3 buildings there, which are the dark roofed ones on that picture, were built after the Schofield block buildings. At one time, there were buildings to the north of Building 2 there as well, but that one burned down. Next slide. As it noted, none of the buildings are actually on the register, but the site has been evaluated by the State Historic Preservation Office 3 times, as far as I could tell, once in 2004, again in 2011, and then again in 2022. My understanding, the 2011 significance narrative from SHPO was undertaken in response to a request by the City of Vancouver during the first CRC project. Subsequent to that review, the building was identified as a key building within the City of Vancouver Historic Overlay District Number 2. The photo on the left there was taken during the 1892 4th of July parade, indicating the location was likely the center of town at that time. I also note the decorative cornice detailing on the corner there, which is, unfortunately is no longer on the building site. Okay, next one. All 3 buildings were constructed with a high degree of workmanship for the time, which is the primary reason they have survived as long as they have. There have been significant modifications to the buildings over the years. Buildings 1 and 3 have been completely covered in stucco, and that stucco is now failing, primarily at the corner of Building 1 and over some of the arches, but in several just random spots there as well. As the stucco is falling off the building, it is pulling the face layer of the brick off as well, so the original brick facade is no longer salvageable. The original storefront, the ground floor storefronts on Building 1 and Building 2 have been completely removed and heavily modified. The transom windows that used to cover over the Padden store portion of it are still there, but have also been completely stuccoed over and are no longer recoverable. All of the cornice detailing on Building 1 has been removed. An awning was added probably around the same time as the stucco and is braced back to the brick walls with cable. The north wall there, which is the bottom picture, which was adjacent to where the building was lost by the fire, and now has a mural on it. Okay, next slide. The ground floor of Building 1 was occupied by the Top Shelf Bar until they lost their business during COVID. The main floor of Building 2 was split into 2 tenant spaces. One was a pawn shop, which closed in 2018, roughly. The other side is Kindred Homestead Supply, which is still there. The second floor spaces haven't had a tenant since the fire, as near as we can tell. So it's been vacant for roughly 50 years. Building 3 is a single-story building currently occupied by Terrain Coffee. At the moment, Terrain and Kindred are the only two remaining tenants of the Schofield block and represent roughly 18% of the rentable floor area and paying well below comparable lease rates in downtown. Next slide. All three buildings are unreinforced masonry structures, which have well-known seismic issues related to them. Over the years, a few voluntary structural upgrades have been made to the buildings by the owner, including adding parapet bracing to the roof and strengthening the the wall-to-floor connections. Some engineered framing has been added to the basement, which is the far right picture there. It appears that was probably done to add support when Top Shelf was in the space due to the higher occupant loads. Those framing members have no positive lateral connections and are just kind of beams sitting on posts with no connections on them. Okay, next one. The walls, all the structural walls come down and bear on a strip of unreinforced concrete that is the same width as the walls themselves. There's no other foundational support on the building. Much of the roof structure is beams and joists subject to spans that are over 4 times the code allowance. So beam bending and ceiling cracking are readily visible throughout. Essentially, every wall on the second floor acts as a bearing wall for the ceiling and roof system. And those second floor walls bear on the floor system with nothing below them. The picture on the right there is taken on the Main Street side of the what was the Pad and General Store building. When the storefront was removed, a wood beam, which is that white beam at the top of the picture there, was added. That currently supports the entire Main Street side of the brick facade. That beam sits on 2 steel posts, and you can see one of them there in that picture. So, yeah, the posts are not braced against lateral movement, and the masonry wall above is minimally braced to the floor line. Okay, next picture. Exterior wall construction is 3 whites of unreinforced brick. Furring strips, which you can see there on the left one, were added to the brick, a lath and plaster finish on the interior. Picture on the left is the second floor, the center picture is the second floor east wall. And that is the one that sits on the wood beam below and supported by the steel columns. You can see that a lot of the mortar has fallen out of the bricks in some locations. The picture in the middle is the west wall of the building, where you can see some organic material starting to grow on the inside face. And the picture on the left there is in the attic space, showing the double construction of the roof and ceiling, sort of cripple walls that don't have any structural support below them. Okay, next slide. There have been 2 structural reviews of the building. The first was simply a list of deficiencies in the building with recommendations for improving them, about 13 pages long. And the second was a more specific review of the building with respect to Vancouver Municipal Code 1732, which is the unfit building code. Basically, our opinion is that the structural condition of the building is not an imminent problem. The building doesn't represent an imminent danger of failure, but it is highly susceptible to failure in a seismic event and would likely become dangerous if it was fully occupied. So any project that involves full use of the building would trigger significant structural upgrades simply to meet minimum life safety expectations. Okay. So where do we go from here? The building is currently losing money on an annual basis and isn't capable of attracting new tenants. The primary goal that we have is to make the building usable, but more than that, we want to make it attractive and restore the historic corner at 6th and Main. The timing for a project right now is actually very good, with the Main Street Promise project about to kick off and renewed interest in the downtown area with the waterfront and other nearby development. Ideally, we would like to add square footage to the building, which at this location can only mean going up. Here in these initial stages, we took a look at 3 different preservation options. The 4 preservation options were full preservation, adaptive reuse, material salvage, and then a 4th that we throw in as a control case, which is full demolition and rebuilding. So, next slide. So the demolition and rebuild option basically looked at the cost of a full removal of the existing building and construction of a new building to current code standards. Because this is a control case, and to make the comparisons equivalent, we used a 4-story building in all 3 options, so we could isolate the factors involved with the different preservation methods. I want to be clear, we haven't at this point settled on a 4-story building, but just so that all 4 options were equivalent, that's what we used. So all relevant building metrics, including building height, total square footage, number of stories, proposed uses, etc., are equivalent. The only factor that changes between them is the preservation component. Okay, next slide. The full preservation option included looking at preservation of both exterior and interior elements, keeping the entire building as close to the original concept as possible. Because the Schofield block is 3 buildings, there are 3 separate structural systems that need to be repaired. This option included a seismic upgrade to all 3 buildings and strengthening of the existing structural components throughout. Since there is no way to salvage the original brick facades on buildings 1 or 3, we're proposing to scrape the failing stucco off and reapply new stucco. Interiors will be stripped down to the studs, new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems provided. With this option, we would need to incorporate the existing burial walls from the 3 buildings into the finished design so that, in effect, it would remain 3 separate buildings. A 2-story addition would then be constructed on top of the existing building.
The 2-story addition is on top of all 3 buildings?
Yeah.
I think there's a rendition coming.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, next slide. So, and just keep in mind, these are preliminary sketches, mostly for massing. So this is the adaptive reuse option. This includes preserving only the exterior walls of the building. The exterior scope is exactly the same as in the full preservation option, but all interior elements would be removed, and it is just the exterior skin of the first 2 levels that is preserved. The existing brick would be tied back to the new structure, and we would use that structure to go up another 2 levels. This option gives us more flexibility with designing the interior of the building, since we could treat the interior spaces as a single building rather than 3 separate buildings. Okay.
So wait, there isn't a slide. Well, I guess it would be this.
It'd be the same. You wouldn't notice it from the
Right.
exterior. Yeah.
But it does, building 3 isn't built up, is it?
No, that does, it shows it's not.
It's not built up in that one.
Building 3?
Building 3 is.
It's still 1 level.
Oh.
Is
yeah,
that going to be is that what you're envisioning, like that?
Yes, we're not currently, yeah,
Okay,
those
thank you.
designs don't include building over the terrain site. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
I'm sorry, the what site?
Oh, sorry. Terrain Coffee. That's
Oh,
the name of the tenant
okay.
in that space. Building 3. Yeah. All right. The material salvage option is where we demo the building very carefully so as to salvage as much of the original building material as possible and then reuse it in the new structure. The new structure could then incorporate some of the original detailing, but it would essentially be constructed from the ground up. This version allows us to use more conventional framing system that is seismic compliant with current code, but still preserving the charm of the original building with the salvaged materials. Available salvage materials include brick, windows, lumber, doors, door frames, stair railings, Schofield building sign, and other decorative elements on the building. Okay, next slide. So we reached out to 2 local general contractors with experience in historic building preservation and adaptive reuse. Both have recent experience with projects of similar scope to all of the 4 options under consideration. Looking at the cost options provided, you start to see that full preservation and adaptive reuse are relatively close in cost, while the material salvage option is relatively similar in cost to the demo and rebuild option. There are other preservation aspects that can be added to any one of the above options. These aren't limited to any particular options and provide an opportunity to collaborate with the local historic museum and preservationists so they stay involved all the way through the process. This one is, that couch there was not in the original one that was sent out, but that couch is known as the Grant couch, apparently, and it's apparently where Ulysses S. Grant took naps from time to time. There's also a cash register from Mary Schofield, and I've heard rumors that a control board used by Willie Nelson when he was a CD is around as well. So those would all make valuable additions to like an interpretive display. So based on our analysis, the project is generally affordable up through the material salvage option. It starts to become unaffordable at the 2 higher preservation levels. Additionally, there are more opportunities for full seismic code compliance, energy efficiency, and tenant flexibility at the material salvage level, all of which begins to get lost with the higher preservation levels. As such, the material salvage option is our preferred preservation pathway. Point, I would be willing to answer questions and open it for discussion.
Thank you so much for coming and presenting. I know this building means a lot to our community. These buildings, there's 3 of them, mean a lot to our community. So we appreciate you coming and having a discussion with us before any large steps are taking place. I would like to open this for a discussion with our...
I have one question.
Go ahead.
What's the square footage?
It's about, well, the 2 levels, yeah.
What's existing?
About 20,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's a little less. It's around 16,000.
Are there any other questions from the commission? All right. Not really a question, it's more of a comment. I know that I have grown up in the area. Kindred is one of my favorite shops of all times, and I know a lot of other people who feel so. While looking through this, I found an article from 2019 in the Columbian talking about the ownership of the Kindred or of the Schofield buildings and the commitment to historic preservation and how it was to be integrated with Main Street. So I found that very reflective and interesting to read before coming into this discussion. Excellent. Would we like to open a discussion on the Schofield buildings?
Well, first thing that I will say is if the city didn't already let you know, there is some financing available through CRESA. Have you looked into that?
We have, yes.
Which stays with the building instead of taking it on personally yourself, right, which can help offset some of these costs. And a lot of this upgrade can be, you know, that money can be used for that. And so there is funding to help with some of those gaps, if the funding is really the issue. I mean, I find this a beautiful building. I mean, I think what happened during COVID is terrible because that kind of was what has dragged that corner down to what it is now. But I also see what Jim did at the Lucky Loan, and he restored that entire building. And I personally would feel horrible seeing a couple extra stories on your building blocking that building. Personally, I think it would outsize, outmass all of the buildings on that block, even if they aren't of the same age. So I have a really hard time with the building up portion of this plan.
You know, I get this, but
if there's a commitment to historic preservation, and I understand you're leaning towards the material salvage option, but having many years of experience with this, it's always surprising how many materials are not salvageable and how the final product comes out and it doesn't really meet the intention of trying to reuse historic materials. I mean, old brick, it's very fragile. I mean, so I get the idea behind that. I'm not sure that the execution is going to be what you would think it would be.
And with the restoration for the beautiful building across the street and up, at the old Lucky Loan, those people have taken a lot of time and effort to restore their buildings to the historic glory that they once were.
And this one's tricky because it's 3 buildings, and they weren't all built at the same time, and it sounds like there's a lot of structural issues. I would much prefer to see the adaptive reuse version of this, but I understand it's more expensive.
Well, one of the things with more expensive that I was curious about first was with Morgan's suggestion of funding, but also all of these prices reflected the addition of the 2 additional stories on top. What would the pricing look like if you did the adaptive reuse, but only focused on the 2 levels that were already there without having the additional cost of the 2 additional floors on top? How would that pricing come out?
I mean, the 2 additional floors are probably the cheapest 2 floors. Once you've done the structural work to upgrade the first 2 floors, you've kind of put the skeleton in place for building up.
Yeah, but those additional 2 floors still cost money.
They're still part of the total cost. So she's just asking, what's your estimate, $2 million for those 2 upper floors?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably looking at, if it was just the seismic upgrade to the existing building, the stucco repairs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all that, you're probably looking at a 12 to 14 million project there. So,
which would therefore be cheaper than the other estimates. Or
it'd be right.
The first one would be
be right there at the same.
It'd be right there at half the square footage. Yeah, the final.
Yeah, I could never cash flow with financing on the building to do this project with just 24,000 square feet. So that's the problem too, is that there's significant problems with financing the building upfront and then going forward with paying.
Have you looked into the CRESA program, like seriously?
Yeah, we have. We did a lot of work because we actually wanted to renovate it before we went down this path.
And what happened with that? You were denied?
We weren't denied, but we looked into how much financing it would actually help our project with. And when you factor in that we need the help up front, it was our best.
But they give you a loan. The bank gives you a loan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it works. So they give you the money up front. That doesn't.
Yeah, it's not enough to make it like a cash flowing project over the long term with paying like the mortgage payment.
And then the other option is, and I don't know if you guys have thought about this, is selling it. I know that there's a couple of people who are interested in buying that building and restoring it to its glory.
We've looked at it in the past, but I represent the 6th generation of the Schofield family, and we want to make it go a lot longer than 6 generations. So we've looked into that in the past, but I think everyone wants to keep this in the family.
Then I would just suggest prioritizing the historic preservation aspect of your plan.
Because would it be the same? It wouldn't be the same buildings. They would be completely new buildings. It would just be the Schofield land.
Right, and we'd have to get the state's weigh in on this too.
Yeah.
The state historic preservation officer will weigh in on this because it is a historic building and it has been determined eligible by him. And I spoke to him today, so he will weigh in on this project.
I assume you're already talking to them.
We have not.
You haven't spoken with the state yet?
No. That would be a good call.
Yeah, I would probably start there. And they also have more funding available than some of the resources that we have here in the county.
And they also, they have a historic architect, so it might be a good conversation to have about, other options and techniques for keeping the character, but still achieving the sizing that you need to make it cash flow.
Yeah, I did go through the building with a preservationist, and I was mainly trying to find a way to salvage the brick facade with all the, after the stucco.
That stucco is so bad.
So bad. We've seen it ruin so many buildings.
I have a
which is one of the
question.
reasons. Yeah, go, John.
So just in this last couple minutes, I heard 3 different numbers put out as to what your square footage is. I heard 16,000, I heard 20,000, I heard 24,000. Which one is it?
So it's 16,000 for the upper floors, including the basement. That's not usable. It's another 8, so it's 24,000 total, including the basement.
Including the basement, because, I mean, the basement is used right now.
24,000
It's
as the building.
for storage, so we can't use it for a new tenant.
So the current 3 buildings together are 24,000 square feet? Because what I heard was 16, and then you're going to add 2 floors to make it 24.
No, it'll be much more than.
No wonder John's confused.
Good question, John.
So it's currently 24,000 square feet, including unusable basement space.
So it's going to need to go through the upgrades to meet the standards anyways in a few years. The seismic upgrades and all of the things that have gone through the legislation. I mean, that's why they made the CRESA funding available, is buildings like your buildings are going to need to be brought up to speed within a few years. And that's one of the reasons they brought that funding forward, was because they know the need is there.
What will it be if there's 2 additional floors added?
We've been looking around 40,000 square feet.
Okay.
And out of curiosity, what would you be utilizing those floors for?
So we do commercial on the ground floor, and what we've looked into would be like a food area for the community to be a family-focused area again. And then on the upper floors, to make the whole project cash flow, we're looking at kind of like a boutique hotel, and with the concept of calling it Mary's and bringing in the couch to call it the original Vancouver Hotel.
That was not the answer I was expecting.
Yeah, so it would not be just like housing that people could purchase. You're looking at just a hotel in and out type of experience then.
Yeah, and we're looking at weaving in our collective family and City of Vancouver history into that hotel with a lot of photographs and stories about the past of how General Grant stayed at the family's couch.
I was curious because I know I agree with the adding 2 floors on top would take away from the buildings that have been fully restored in the area. I was just curious if you were going to be doing like low-income housing or local housing, but the hotel idea hadn't entered my mind. But yeah, revisiting what we'd said earlier about the material salvage reuse, if most of the stucco would be damaged, or the bricks would be damaged from the stucco and could not be reutilized, I'm assuming, the majority of them, what materials were you assuming would be salvaged and used into this hotel?
Well, there's actually quite a few bricks that are. I mean, it's only the exterior facade bricks that are damaged. There are, it's 3 buildings, so the interior brick walls are 3 wipes of brick, full height, that don't have stucco on them. It goes all the way into the basement. So I mean, there's quite a bit of brick that's salvageable there and could easily be used in a veneer type brick situation.
Are there any other elements?
The windows, there's those really big windows around there. Those could be removed, reglazed, finished up. There's a bunch of door frames that are just sitting inside the building that could be reused. There's salvageable lumber. And then, like I said, there's the Schofield sign that's on Main Street.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So for the commission, there is no formal vote on this item. This is informational only. However, from what I have heard, I would like for you to take away that we would strongly suggest that you revisit the funding and run this up the ladder to state historic preservation. They might have more options for you, and they will definitely have some ideas for how to help you keep this building historic. And I know from my own opinion, as well as others I've heard, we would prefer for you to go the adaptive reuse way, keep the beautiful building a beautiful historic building. And I know we have also all spoken about keeping it the same size. Are there any other things that we would like for them to go forward with in mind?
I mean, I would say go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry, it's hard for me to read the room there. You know, I just know
Yeah.
we have a massive housing shortage. And so to hear that a hotel was going in is kind of the opposite route of what I think we should be forward thinking, when we can have some apartments or something that might be affordable to people on like the first time out, and then living in the heart of the city is very appealing to a lot of people. And so that would be my preference with the adaptable reuse, is the thought of housing rather than just another apartment or another hotel.
I actually like the idea of the hotel because we don't really have any kind of historic hotel in Vancouver. It's all pretty much new construction chain hotels. So to me, that would be a unique addition to Main Street into downtown.
Except for that it would be the 2 new floors.
But the lower floor, I mean, there's already 2 floors. So the lower floor would be, retail, and then the 1 historic floor and 2 new floors would be. But if you're using, historic materials and you could reuse the brick, I mean, I actually like the idea of a hotel, but that's actually up to the property owner, not us.
Right.
Yes, this is all up to the property owner in the end. So those would be things that we would like you to consider. If you have any questions or would like some support or guidance, I hear you have some great resources already, but please reach out to us. We would love to give you ideas that you may not have thought of, or connect you with some additional resources that you might use for this project.
Thank you.
And if they're going to pursue the material salvage option, I'd like to see more details about what exactly that's going to look like. And I realize these slides they're just massing the upper floors, but I hate massing things because people take them as gospel and then look at it and go, oh God, that's ugly. We ran into the same issue when the academy was being redeveloped, because people were up in arms about these square boxes, which are not what actually ended up there. So
I'm friends with Stacy Graham. I remember that very well.
Yes, whichever path you decide to take, we love, the more detail you can give us, the happier we are. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming in and providing this amazing presentation and giving us all this information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lind Wallach from the Clark County Parks Department, who will present an update on the Heritage Farm. Lind?
The wetland first.
Hello, I'm Lindy Wallach. I'm the Park and Trails Planner with Clark County Parks and Lands, and I'm joined today by Rocky Houston, our Parks and Lands Director. So I'm here to talk about Heritage Farm sustainability plan today. Also, Rocky will present on the wetland restoration at Heritage Farm, and then our last presentation will be for Hazeldale Community Park. These are all projects that we've been here before about. We're just here to provide some updates. So our last visit to historic preservation was last year in May of 2023. We presented some information on the overall project history for the sustainability plan and the goals just to give you a mini refresher, the goals for the plan are to increase public access and financial sustainability for the farm while implementing the approved master plan that was adopted by Clark County Council in 2020. I told you about the progress that we had made by that point. At that time, we were just beginning to write the draft plan for the sustainability plan. We had 6 steering committee meetings by that point. I also talked about the makeup of the steering committee and some of the outreach work that we had done, including some conversations with community leaders about the future of the farm. Next slide. So this is a look at the timeline. I'm not going to go through all of this with you, but when I was last here, we were getting ready to work on that our draft plan development, which is near the center there. It took us quite a bit longer. Took me quite a bit longer than I anticipated. And so we wrapped that up in late winter of 2023, late fall of 2023, and shared that with the steering committee for plan development in December of 2023. In January of 2024, this is 2024, right? In 2024, we had our second public open house where we presented the plan to the community. We had a lot of good feedback from that meeting. We've also been to the Heritage Farm Advisory Team, the Park Advisory Board, and then we've also met with the Northeast Hazeldale Neighborhood Association just to give a presentation on the plans. And we have made some minor changes since our initial release of the draft plan to the public in January of 2024, just based on some feedback that we received. Oh, I'm sorry, can you go back? I forgot to mention that we have had one work session with council where we presented the draft sustainability plan. That was, I think, April 17th, somewhere around there. We also received positive feedback there, and we're kind of in a limbo situation where we were supposed to have our adoption hearing yesterday, but that's now scheduled for June 18th. So just to give you a very brief overview of the plan, and it is available on the Heritage Farm Sustainability Plan website. The most current plan is available there. The plan does detail the public process that we went through. I touched on that last time and just a little bit here. It talks about the context surrounding the farm. We took a look at the cultural and historical resources as well as a more in-depth dive on the current uses. We talked about past planning and studies that have been done at the farm. We looked at both of the master plan updates. We looked at operational strategy plan that WSU, the Washington State University's Metro Center, did for us with some suggestions and recommendations for the future of the farm. We also looked at all the historical documents and the listing on the historic registry of the application. Since one of the main goals is financial sustainability, there is a good amount of detail on a financial analysis that we did. We worked with our business services team at the county to better understand the average expenses that we have to operate Heritage Farm each year. And they were able to share with us that we spend about $170,000 a year in expenses to operate the farm. And you may think, oh, for all that you see there, that's what that costs. But it doesn't include anything to do with WSU and the extension services contract that we have with them to provide those services for the county. And it doesn't include money to support that specific agreement. So the $170,000 a year is typically includes the farm specialist position who works at the farm to help with maintenance and ongoing operations. It also includes some other expenses, and it has an averaged in some capital improvement projects that we've had in the past couple of years, like irrigation upgrades to the farm. The financial analysis also includes a summary of volunteer contributions. The information provided in the plan is from 2023, but when we were working with the steering committee, we were talking about information from 2021 and 2022. This information is collected by the Heritage Farm Advisory Team and then shared with us. So in 2023, there are over 14,000 volunteer hours recorded at Heritage Farm, And it's believed that there are many more hours that are that are provided there, but that's what they can muster up to report. In addition, those volunteers were able to grow and donate over 130,000 pounds of produce that's valued just under $300,000 to local food banks, and not just the Clark County Food Bank, but other food banks throughout the county. And that goes to provide over 200,000 meals to Clark County residents just in 2023. Also, there were over $300,000 in private contributions that were provided to support farm programs. So those programs are not supported by county funds. Those are all run off of volunteer donations. And if you calculate all of that up, it adds up to around $1 million, which is a pretty good return on investment for that 170,000. The plan also includes a site analysis. We looked at the environmental and use zones at the farm. We looked at topographic constraints. We looked at surrounding land use, considered what's appropriate here. Is it appropriate to have a head of cattle in the middle of an urban area in the city, and most likely not. And then also, is it easier to, how easy is it to lease space to a farmer over a large area, because it is more difficult to operate a farm in the middle of an urban area. And then we talked about agricultural production feasibility. We recognize that the land has high quality soils, that there's water on site, which are all positives for the site. Next slide. So the plan includes 3 alternatives. Back in March, in 2023, in April of 2023, we had our last our steering committee workshop, and we just had that when I came here in 2023. And at that steering committee workshop, we asked the steering committee to self-select into small groups. Some folks worked individually, but they broke up into 6 groups. They all worked together to develop alternatives for consideration in the plan. And when what we did is we provided a list of programmatic elements and or different types of programming that you could see at the farm. That list was based on what was already going on at the farm, things that had occurred there in the past but that weren't happening at the time, and also suggestions that we received through our community survey for the project, through our community leader interviews, and some from council. And we also provided them with a list of cost recovery options. The general fund is the main source of funds for the farm right now, but one of the main goals of the farm, or one of the main goals of the project, is to shift the costs or the expenses off of the general fund, the county's general fund. But we had a lot of different options and suggestions there. So the steering committee combined those programmatic elements and cost recovery options into alternatives that we went and looked at while we were drafting our sustainability plan. And we ended up finding a lot of consistency between the 6 groups, and we funneled those all down into alternative 3, which ends up being our preferred alternative, and I'll go through that one in a second. But we do include 2 additional alternatives, which the steering committee wanted us to make sure that we included in the plan. The first of which is to continue operating the farm in the current manner with some modifications to the revenue generation options that we identified during the plan development process. While this doesn't meet the goals of the sustainability plan, the goals that were set forth by the council, the steering committee thought that it was important to at least keep the alternative within the plan, to recognize the number of folks who are current farm partners, people who are working out at the farm that really are resistant or concerned about seeing change there. Alternative 2 is an NGO or a non-governmental organization to come in and operate the farm. This would mean that we need to issue an RFP, or request for proposal, to seek selection of that third-party organization. There were a couple of members of the steering committee that were supportive of this, but the vast majority were really concerned because there's some risk involved with reaching out to an NGO and finding one that has the financial capacity to bring capital in and make investment in the farm, and to pay the ongoing operational costs in the long run. And so they mostly we're not in favor of this option. But we wanted to make sure it was in there because this is a dynamic situation. If one presented itself in the future, definitely we could consider that. But alternative 3 is, as I said, kind of an amalgamation of those 6 alternatives that the steering committee put together. And it envisions the farm more like an agriculturally focused community park where we would have, still have active agriculture areas like you see now, but we'd also have recreation areas that would be more like you would see at one of our community park with passive recreation. And those areas would be separated by purposeful design, mostly fencing or landscaping would separate those from one another. So right now, if you were to drive down 78th Street or 68th Street past the farm, you would just see a very tall fence with barbed wire.
There are sections of barbed wire.
Sections of barbed wire. And so our goal is to not have that fence there. And I'm going to go on to the next one. I'll go through alternative 3 in a little bit more detail. So this is a little bit more detail of what's included in alternative 3. We have the programmatic elements in red, purple, and orange, and then the cost recovery elements are in that greenish yellow color. So for agricultural elements, we have a lot of what you already see today. We have WSU Extension Services, which is something that we said was something that could not be taken away. It must be included in any alternative that we consider. We also have community gardens. We have ag lease space, ag research space. We have food production for underserved communities. We have composting education and historic farm tours. Those are all things that we're seeing today and that the steering committee wanted to see move on into the future. We also have some things that we don't see today, like incubator farming programs, farm-to-table programs, farm stand, vendor lease space, and farm park amenities. Those are things that would need to have, except for the farm, well, maybe the farm park amenities too, we would need to have somebody approach the county with a programming, like a program operator that would bring that type of program to the farm. And the Heritage Farm Advisory Team and the county would consider those program applications once they're received. For educational programmatic elements, we have a community outdoor classroom, which is something that we're already halfway in discussion with WSU Extension Services and how an outdoor classroom can be shared between a fully publicly accessible facility and also on the controlled side of the fence, the controlled access side. And we have about school district programming because there's a continued vision to have all the kids in the local school districts be able to visit the site and learn more about where their food comes from and how hard it is to grow it, and just be concerned about that in the future. We have community trails that are open to the public, which is something that was already included in the adopted master plan, both 2010 and the update in 2020. And we have a children's play area. And I'll just note that the children's play area and the farm park amenities were not necessarily something that the steering committee supported, but something that park planning, and I hope Rocky supports, because we feel that when you build these types of, or you provide these types of amenities, opportunities, you're drawing families in, they're getting to see more what the farm has to offer. They're able to look across the fence into the controlled access area and maybe be more interested in participating in programs that are going on there. And then for cost recovery elements, we still have general fund support. Most of the public through our community survey and even community leader interviews felt that there was always going to be some need for general fund support for the life of the farm. But here you also see Metropolitan Park District's funds. I forgot to mention that. When we imagine Heritage Farm as an agriculturally focused community park, we would be able to transfer a lot of that $170,000 a year over to the Metropolitan Park District Fund. And if you're more interested in the details of that, I'm sure Rocky can espouse to it. But we also have lease adjustments, fee for farm services. Those are just different programs that we're looking at just to make sure that we're recouping, closer to recouping the costs that we have for operating the farm and the equipment there to help leaseholders. We have Friends of the Farm fundraising, and we've been in contact with them. They're really excited for us to get the plan adopted, so they have a good something to focus their fundraising on a little bit more. And we have grants and donations, et cetera. Next slide. so our next steps for the sustainability plan is that we have that council hearing for adoption scheduled for June 18th. And then I have plan implementation, but we've really already been having some conversations around plan implementation. We've been working with the current farm partners on talking about increases in public access and what that's going to look like, hearing their concerns so that we can start thinking about that when we really look more into feasibility and what those public access improvements will look like. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I come back to talk about Hazeldale Park, because they're semi-related. I think that's my last. Oh, no, I have a thank you slide.
Excellent, thank you. And also, very important thank you slide. That was a recent discussion I had with my work, not here. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming. Is there any discussion that the commissioners would like to have on this topic?
I just
Don had his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. I know I'm at iTech Prep, and I know our students came out and did some field trips there. You know, as a STEM school, we're really doing, you know, trying to do our part with our science teachers, talking about like where your food comes from and all that kind of stuff. And so it's great to have this type of experience and place for our kids to go and visit, because it's vitally important, I think, as we keep moving forward in this ever-changing ecosystem that we have here. And so the work you're doing is really important, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. We'll actually be at iTech Prep for another park that we're developing a master plan for on the 20th. If you're there, we'd love to say hi to you.
Excellent. I know we had a public comment earlier relating to this project, so I would like to thank our public commenters for coming and participating in this great plan. Thank you. And Jan?
No, but you were saying you have 2 more presentations, right?
Yes. Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming and presenting this to us.
Thank you.
And the next one.
That's the wetland restoration.
Yep.
For the record, Rocky Houston, Division Manager for Parks and Lands in Public Works. I'm going to here on behalf of Clean Water, one of our partners in this program, to give you an update on the wetland restoration project. Next slide. So were we here in May, November 23 as well? Sorry, I wasn't, so my memories,
I could do this.
I have blanks, no. We're currently at just passing the 65% design element. We're going to provide you with some of those design elements, look at the planting plan, give you sort of those overall project goals and benefits, run over this very quickly for you, and then open it up for questions. Next slide. So on our train of process, we're hoping to, next month, get to our 90% design, submit our permit package for the environmental permitting, get our final design, and go out to bid in the spring of 2025, and hopefully start construction or at least mobilization in June of 2025, leading to the final completion of our construction in December of 25, and then planting and monitoring those plantings until 2023. Next slide. So the current conditions is there's a ditch. This is the headwaters, or real close to the headwaters of Cougar Creek. As you all know, it's open here, and as it approaches 78th Street, it disappears under the ground and pops out over off Hazeldale Drive on the other side of I-5. And so the purpose here is to try to get that water to flow less quickly and get colder. By that is getting ground penetration to the groundwater, as well as having these pools and the vegetation there to provide that riparian habitat. Next slide. So as an overview of the design as we're at, we have, I believe it's 8 little pools or ponds that we'll be having that brings the water in, and then I like to think it's a majestic cascading from pond to pond. I'm sure it's going to be much more engineered than that, but still, the opportunities to come in, have these pools to allow that penetration in the groundwater. There'll be little check dams as it allows the water to continue to flow down through. It's much wider and meanders a little bit to be symbolic of a standard stream instead of a straight ditch, and keep our access to the farm, those 2 access roads open, and then meander down to where it will enter into the pipe that it currently does there on the northwest corner. Again, we're trying to continue to have access remain. After this project's completed, we will have a project that'll follow up where we'll have an interpretive trail around this wetland area that'll be integrated into some other efforts to keep that engagement high and move on to sustainability goals of trying to get that access in there and that engagement. We're going to do some blow-ups here of these areas real quick. Next slide. And so as you look to the westerly side of it, you can see the existing parking lot, homes, administrative building, and you can see that we're making sure that there's an island around the over 100-year-old weather station. We have those little check dams there. Those won't be for public access, but those will be there. We are looking at potentially in the eastern side a boardwalk or something like that allow us to kind of get out in that and interpret that a little bit better. But knock on wood, we'll be able to afford that. But you can see the new boundaries for vegetation in the slopes, and so it'll be like a pond, and then there'll be gentle slopes. They're steeper than we always want them to be, but there'll be, I think, a 6-to-1 slope that will be vegetated. Next slide.
Can I just mention that we did work with NOAA on the weather stations? Those have been recording for over 100 years, I believe. And so there was some work done to make sure that they aren't going to be disturbed. So I think they were moved a few feet, but it didn't tamper with the length of time that it's going to be stated that it's been operating there. So,
as well as, and we'll get to our planting plan later. We've modified our planting plan to be consistent with their needs as well. Next slide. This is the easterly side. Again, you're going to see that. If you recall in the master plan, this northeast corner is where the new entrance would be coming in and a new parking lot. And this is where we would envision in the future where we'd be trying to embrace that, I call it recreational grazing at the farm, that we talked about having some of that passive recreation element and trying to have that start over in this area. Please note you also see a 35-foot vegetative buffer. That's a requirement of our grant from the Department of Ecology. So that, which brings me to the next slide, if I remember it correctly. So this is a planting plan. So we've got it top-down view and then sort of if you were standing looking at it view, so you can kind of see the different vegetation heights and different planting. We're really focused on having this not look like a riparian thicket, but more of a planned landscape that allows vignettes into the waterways and through the farm from 78th Street. So that visual appearance is something we're really focused on, ensuring that when it does get planted initially, it's always going to look, you know, like hair first coming in or something. But the plan is to have this variation height to encourage that interpretation and engagement with the public. Next slide.
The trail won't be, I mean, people won't be able to access the water, right?
Correct. We won't have an access to the water. Correct. Yes. We'll have it roughly about 35, 40 feet back from the water, except for that potential boardwalk, which would bring you across it to have that better experience. There's the, what's that one by, I always forget, Thomas Wetland. I don't know if you guys have been there, where it's in by Doug Fisher?
Yes, Fisher Carter. Douglas Carter Fisher.
Carter Fisher Neighborhood Park, which is southeast of the farm. They have a similar project where they did that, where there's a trail around the edge, and if you went there today, it's very leafed out and you can't see in, and that's something that we were cognizant of as we were going through this design to make sure it's appreciated 10 years from now when it's all fully grown out. This is just a quick list of the plants that we're proposing to be planting in here. You'll see a variety of buffer wetland plants that are all native and are consistent with the parameters of the program that we have. So again, and try that variation and make it pleasing. Our planning and design manager spent a lot of time working on this planting plan with other staff to try to get that feeling and that energy that the farm has today and moving it forward through this process. Next slide.
Nice to see all the ones that support pollinators.
Yes, yes. Of course, it's a state law now that 25% of plantings have to be pollinators as well, and we're exceeding that. Go ahead and put the next slide, sir. So Scott Falker is the actual project manager, so if anyone does have questions about the project as it moves forward, we have his contact information here. He wasn't able to be here tonight. And of course, we have a website that you can link to get updates as we move forward. And so we're hoping the next stop is to get our permitting back and get a green light to then be able to finalize the design and move it to our bid package to be able to, this time next year, hopefully have be in the process of awarding a contract to someone.
So in the meantime, in the year's meantime, will you have an archaeological survey of this project?
They've already had one, and it's been submitted to DAP.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there any discussion that we want to have on this part?
And of course, there's a thank you slide, right?
Is there a thank you slide? Yeah, it looks like there is a thank you slide.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I love a good thank you slide. I have two quick questions. One of them is terminology. Can you please define recreational grazing?
Yes, it is.
I'm thinking sheep.
Think of it as a passive recreation utilizing the farm like you would see cattle or other things as they're on the trail meandering around and looking out and becoming engaged and excited about what is happening at the farm. So instead of seeing sheep in the field, you'll see people walking along that pathway to get to our other property. And hopefully I guess the theme of grazing is a way of hopefully getting other program there interested in that. So they'll see master gardening, they'll see master recycling or a volunteer opportunity, and being on site, because as you know now, you drive by, many of us, it feels very institutional for one, and you don't really know what's going on there. And so we're hoping that this is a way to get people to kind of stop and just walk their legs a little bit, and hopefully that generates other engagement on the other side of the active farming.
Awesome, thank you. And my second question was regarding the check dams. Are those going to be natural material, or are they just kind of going to be slopes to create the pools? How is that going to go?
We need my engineer here to do that, but it is primarily earthen dams, but there will be a mechanical check at the bottom that will allow us to raise or lower the volume of water depending upon the conditions.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, next presentation.
Okay, Hazel Dell Community Park Master Plan update. We also talk about site improvements. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So I did speak to this back in May of 2023. Then we talked about the history of the site, how its connection to Heritage Farm as it is part of the historic district, the Clark County Port Farm Historic District. We shared a 1975 master plan that looks a lot like the park lot does today. The developed portion of the park. We talked about the character of the site and also reviewed our plan for our master plan and site improvements project. Next slide, please. So we did start in 2023. In September of 2023, we had a community survey, which I'll touch on a little bit more in a second. Over the winter of 2023 to early 2024, we put together a concept plan based on our community survey feedback, and then we hosted an open house with the public, I think it was March 27th of this year, where we presented that concept. We also shared with them the site improvements portion of the project as well. And then since last month and this month, we have met with the Northeast Hazel Dell Neighborhood Association just to provide them a little more insight into the project, and also have been looking at a trail feasibility survey that we've done on the south side of a heritage farm that will eventually connect to Hazeldale Park, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. So the next slide. Okay, so these are the results, or some of the results, to the community survey that we had in 2023. So it was open from mid-August to mid-September. We had it in 4 different languages and publicized it across the county. We received just under 400 responses. We had several questions that we asked, but the one that I'm focusing on here is that we asked people to rank 7 possible features from least appealing to most appealing. And we had identified 7 things that we thought were appropriate for this site based on the historic nature, the needs of the neighborhood around, and just kind of making sure that this is appropriately combined with Heritage Farm and the uses there. So you can see here, folks were really excited about restroom. And interpretive trails, nature and theme play, educational gardens, and then passive recreation, which features grazing, I guess, yeah. And then another shelter and an outdoor classroom.
So shelter's like a picnic shelter.
Mm-hmm. And the next slide. So this is a look at the site improvements project. So this is a focus on the existing developed portion of the development portion of the farm. Just as a reminder, and you'll see this a little bit in a couple of slides, but there's the main 20-acre portion of the park that's developed now, the very treed section, and then there's kind of a flag lot that extends out along Northeast 68th Street that used to be part of Heritage Farm, but that there was a boundary line adjustment in 2015 to swap 5 acres at the north end of Hazeldale Park with the 5 acres at the south end of Heritage Farm. And so this, as I said, is specific to the developed portion. The site improvements focus on paving and formalizing parking in the existing parking area. Right now it's dirt mixed with a little bit of gravel, and it's a very chaotic parking situation there. So we will add 28 parking stalls here, 6 of those ADA, and we will create accessible routes from that parking lot to the 2 picnic shelters. They're not completely obvious here, but there's one right off of the parking area, and then one a little closer to the top of your screen where one of the trails looks like it dead ends, but it doesn't really dead end. But the accessible route will lead you to that and to the play areas that are near that northeastern picnic shelter. So we were able, or the consultant was able to find actual ADA routes, and so some of the existing routes will be adjusted a little bit, and that's going to require a few of the trees to be removed, but we've really made an effort to make sure that we are preserving as many of the trees as possible. And I know it's hard to see on the screen there is some kind of orangey rust shading in a couple of areas around the parking area and along the trail kind of in the center of the slide where you'll see a few of the trees that need to be removed. Since this plan was put together, we've been in touch with DAP, and they have shown us an image that we didn't have access to, and that's that there's a potential archaeological site near the entrance point. That's the existing entrance to Hazeldale Park. And so I don't have information on that yet, but that is something that we'll be looking more into. And before we come back to you with the final plan for this, we would have sorted all of that out and possibly made adjustments to our plan. Can we go on to the next slide, and then I'll come back to this one? Sorry, I kind of put them out of order. So this is a look at the flag lot that extends out along Northeast 68th Street. 68th Street would be at the bottom of this image. And then you'll see the existing picnic shelter over towards the right-hand side. And you'll see that the parking lot kind of extends out. The work will either be done at one time. This parking lot might be extended when the site improvements are made on the 2 slides ago. So it may not be that we're creating a parking lot and then tearing it out or ripping out a portion of it a few years later, but this may end up being extended or installed in one phase. But you'll see an extended parking lot. That's 2-way traffic now. along that parking area. That entrance on the left aligns with Northeast 17th Avenue, I believe, if anybody's interested. There's 3 activity nodes here. The one to the right, to the east, is identified, that small brown one, as an outdoor classroom. And then as you move west, you see some garden areas, some picnic tables, and then the larger, it's actually kind of orangey rust color, is a nature play area, which is something that was highly rated in our survey data. Then you'll see, I think the restroom comes first, and then another picnic shelter, a new picnic shelter. And then the green area on the left is an open lawn space, and you'll see a small white rectangle there, and that's a new proposed building. It could be a shelter, it could be a partially enclosed building. In case you happen to have been to our open house in March, it used to say historic building. We had some wild ideas that probably didn't align with historic preservation considerations, and so we were encouraged to change our thought process, and so we've re-identified this as a farm-themed building, and I'm not sure what that would look like, but we would, of course, be here when we get to that point, and we're ready to apply for a permit. The purpose of that building is to act as a gathering space, possibly for interpretive trails or docent-led tours up into the farm, most likely with stops at the historic cemetery or outside the historic cemetery, and then up to viewpoints and around to the other end of the farm. And I should stop and say that this is a concept. This is not a design. This is not what we know it's going to look like this. These are this is a plan or a concept for how we envision potentially meeting the community's needs, what they've provided to us through their feedback through the survey and the open house, and then also how we meet our ability to maintain the property and to meet the site conditions, the existing site conditions. So since this drawing has been put together, we've been talking about a trail up into Heritage Farm, and here you can see there from that green node, the lawn space and where the farm-themed building is, there's a little windy trail you see there, and that would most likely, is initially where we thought the trail might align, but through our survey or our feasibility survey that we started last month, we're not completely sure because there's a lot of permitting and investigation we'll have to do as we move forward through this. But most likely the lawn space might have to be swapped with and moved to the center because it seems like to get an ADA or accessible route, trail standards route up to the farm, you might need to kind of relocate those. And if you go back to the last slide. So these are some images that we put together on ideas of what this master plan, the flag lot, might look like. At the top left, you'll see some themed play equipment. There's some nature play elements that you see around too that are kind of scattered around the image with like little log hops, stump hops, walking across logs. I believe some rocks in there are boulder play as well. And then you also see a lot of pollinator plants. We've talked about pollinator meadows potentially, or garden spaces, potentially even community garden spaces. There's a big push for additional community garden spaces from Heritage Farm. Maybe it's more appropriate to have something like that here at Hazeldale Park as well. You see trails, examples of different shelters, what those might look like. But again, these are all just ideas, things that we would, once we get closer and further along, we would come back to you with. So now we can go 2 slides down, I think. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about trail connections. This is the original, not the original, this is the 2020 master plan update for Heritage Farm. We've had a lot of encouragement from our council more recently to begin public access improvements to Heritage Farm sooner than we have it in our capital improvement plan. Initially, we had planned on coming from the northeast side of Heritage Farm, which would be up along 78th Street. But because of the wetland restoration and that kind of complicated permitting situation there, staff working on that has asked us not to pursue permits or construction of those improvements until after those permits are closed out. And so we have been talking and considering starting from the south corner or from the south portion of the site at Hazeldale Park with what I just showed you on the master plan, and having the trail start from Hazeldale Park. So we are just in very early feasibility discussions about this, and we've had one site visit just to start looking at it. We have had a conversation with DAP about things around the cemetery and other considerations. We know there's 3 stars here, and so I'll just kind of visually kind of explain to you the trail in case you're interested. The star that's on the bottom left, like I said earlier, will probably move more towards the center of that flag lot for Hazeldale Park, and that would probably be the primary entry point off of Hazeldale Park. And it would wind its way through that kind of slopey area up over towards the cemetery, which you see on the western boundary. I don't know if you're all familiar with where the cemetery is on the plot, and it's hard for me to point to here, but Bart, do you know? Yep, right in there. Yes. So there's the cemetery is there. We are aware that it's a little bit larger than, or maybe a little bit, I don't think a little bit is quite accurate, but it's larger than what the existing split rail fence shows. We've talked about just internally considering moving that fence so that it's appropriate to the actual boundary of the cemetery and having an interpretive point outside the fence that would overlook the cemetery but not encourage folks to visit there. And then the trail would wind its way back and forth up the slope to the end of those trees that you see that are just north of the cemetery. So that you have, yep, right there. So you'd have a nice view. From that point, you can see the north end of the farm. You can see the active ag areas. You can see the future community park passive grazing elements. And you can see Mount St. Helens. From there, the trail would connect back over to Hazeldale Park up at the north end, and it would wind its way out to that upper right star. And somewhere around there, it would come back out and then make its way back towards the northeast corner of the park, the farm. And then we've actually purchased an additional property that was known as the Hidden Property that's just east of Heritage Farm. And so the trail, although it's shown here as being kind of circular around the perimeter of the farm, we don't envision that that's how it's going to work out, because we're going to keep folks out of the active ag areas. And so the purpose of purchasing that property was our hopes that we would, one, be able to preserve the headwaters of Cougar Creek, but also be able to route the trail through that area so we can keep people out of the active ag areas. And so it would make its way back up to that interpretive trail around the wetland restoration. So we know we're going to be here in the future. We're going to be asking you more questions. We're going to have a lot more work to do ahead of ourselves. And we're aware that we're going to have some changes that are going to come up when we are talking about the trails through this area. We know that the trail is not going to look exactly like we hope it might look today, but we have a lot of work in front of us to figure out what that is.
I just want to note that everything that Lindy just talked about is several future phases. Please envision as our first phase is going to get potentially up to that vista, and it'll be a little lollipop and bring it right back into Hazeldale. So it's just a glimpse of it, and the other connections would be future phases. So it's going to take us a lot of time and public process to get the full connection.
Thank you, Rocky. I did want to mention that the master plan, while it is a plan that we're hoping to have adopted later this year by council and to come bring the document back to you, we would still need funding in line and in place to be able to construct that, and that's not all sorted out at this point. So we can go on to the next slide. All right, so we have a lot of next steps, as you might have guessed. So I've got kind of 2 tracks here, one for the master plan update and one for those public access improvements, which is paving the parking lot and the trail adjustments over at the developed portion of the park. So for the master plan update, we are working on finalizing that master plan drawing. As you can imagine, we're making some minor changes to the drawing itself, but also we have a document to write, which I'm going to write a lot faster than the sustainability plan, by the way. And then we're going to bring that back to you so that you can look at it and hopefully provide some comments or maybe a recommendation on it. And then we'll also be taking that to the Parks Advisory Board, and then that goes to council for adoption. For public access improvements, we are, as I said, working on that trail layout and feasibility. We need to finalize that site plan. Bringing the trail into it really will require adjustments to our site plan, and we have some funding to work out there as well. But we'll be working on the design and permitting of that later this year and into next year. And then the earliest we could construct that is 2026. And I think I have a thank you slide. There we go. Yes.
County requirement. Now it's a requirement, yeah.
There's a lot of information. I just want to keep you updated in our process as we move forward, so I don't bring you something and you'll be like, where did this come from?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions or discussions now that we've seen all three?
No, look forward to hearing all the phases.
Yes. How about you, John? Got any questions? Nope, John's good. So yes, I'm excited to hear about the new archaeological information, and I can't wait to see how things develop.
Great. Thank you so much for having us.
So much for coming.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Can we take 5?
Oh, yes, let's take 5. Actually, we're going to take 1 second before 5.
Okay.
Next, we're going to have the Interstate Bridge Replacement Cultural Resources. For the sake of time, I'm wondering if we are all in agreement to postpone that for a later meeting?
We have checked with them, and they're okay with that.
They're okay with postponing?
All right.
I'm okay with that.
We have all agreed to postpone the Interstate Bridge Replacement Cultural Resources to another meeting. Thank you, Haley, for coming and being with us while we did this. And now we will take 5. All right, and we are back from our 5-minute break. Thank you, everyone, for giving us that time. Right before the break, we agreed that to postpone the updates from the Interstate Bridge Replacement Cultural Resources team, and we thanked Haley Breff for coming and supporting us as she has been many months. We are now moving on to old business. First, Bart will summarize the status of recruitment of the 2 commission terms that will expire June 30th. Bart?
Yeah, just real quick, we were able to convene a group of members to review the applications that we received in the open application period last month. It was a productive meeting. Per our usual protocol, we don't like to discuss individual applications until they're approved by council, but just wanted this group to know that 2 strong applicants were recommended, and that is going to council on consent on the 18th of this month. So, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Bart. Next, Susan will provide an update on the budget balance and discuss upcoming conference participation.
Yeah. Oh, got it. Because you posted.
There we go. Sneaky.
I realized I had posted the conference information and had not posted the updated budget, so my apologies for that. I'm interested in seeing who might be, well, I would like to present the budget to you first and then see if you're interested in conferences or any other expenditures for the year. So I'll start out with some information, and Jason is here to answer any questions, but Jason put in a one-time budget request to increase the budget for this year only for $5,000. So the total for this year is $15,000. And I think that goes along with the change. Jason, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
No, that was approved as part of the spring supplemental budget. And unfortunately, it's just one time only, so it's just for the remainder of this year. So I would encourage you to try to find ways to spend it. It will not carry forward. And unfortunately, with the latest news about the city's budget deficit, I don't anticipate this being an ongoing increase. We'll probably revert back to the $10,000 amount. So just spend the money, please.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and we can spend it, and most likely will.
And so I think one other thing you might want to note that at least was a small change. Previously, it's been a biennial budget, and now it's going to be an annual budget. And so, or it's approved every 2 years, but
Yeah,
they still have to
it's a
spend it.
biennium budget, so we're in the process of planning for that for 25, 26, but it's $10,000 for each year of the biennium.
But if we haven't spent it all at the end of the first year, can the remainder carry forward?
No.
Oh.
It used to, but it no longer does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's dumb.
Thank you, but that's.
Don't hate the messenger.
I know.
No.
I mean, just
Heart the message.
government,
Yeah,
government is sometimes slow at spending money.
Well, let's go.
I do think we've talked about this before, but I believe if you
If you already have it committed.
committed to it and it's for the following year, you can do that. So maybe look ahead.
Okay. Like for our membership.
Or, yeah, okay. So what do we have we got,
Yes, what do we have penciled in so far, and what is our remaining?
Yeah, so if you can scoot down just a little bit. Scoot. So.
there you go.
Well scooted, thank you.
Thanks, Scoot.
So there's just over $10,000 available. That includes the WAMA conference sponsorship payment. And I included just some information from conferences last year. This is the conference that Commissioner Thatcher and Commissioner Mandler-Huff went to in D.C., but you can see how much attendance at one conference that includes flight and hotel might cost.
Mm-hmm.
The other document has the upcoming conferences that I knew of. Yes. So the NAPC forum is coming up. Commissioner Bond went to that, I think, last July, and then made a presentation after she attended about that. And the Revitalize, which is now called Places, is coming up in October. And I think the next agenda item, which we might want to roll into this, is about the July meeting. But if we have traditionally foregone the July meeting because it falls so closely to 4th of July, if that happens, we need to get people registered for conferences. So what I'm hoping tonight is that maybe you can consider how you might want to spend the funds and vote on, even if we don't know who, conference attendance or whatever you want to spend the money on, so we can plan ahead in case there's not a July meeting. Just to finish this out, the other conference that's coming up is Pass Forward, and that is in October in New Orleans.
Excellent, thank you for that. What are our thoughts regarding the upcoming conferences? Who might be interested in attending? Which ones we should focus on?
Well, I think we discussed this last time or the time before, and I think the very first conference is in Florida, and everyone said hot.
I think hot. I do remember that discussion.
Yes, I mean unbearable. So everyone was okay missing that this year.
Yes.
Places, we know that this one was definitely going because we're on the board. Then that's always a really great one. I know that I was interested in going to the Pass Forward conference, and I actually already booked my room.
Oh, good for you.
Because the rooms opened and they said they were gonna go fast.
Good.
So I already booked a room for that, whether I get sponsored or not.
Well, we know, so Heidi's out for,
Till October.
okay, so she's probably not going to any of these.
And then we have teachers that tend to not wanna leave their students.
Well, John, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not teaching, I'm running for office, so I'll be busy doing that.
Oh, John.
So you're not interested in going to any of these conferences?
I would have zero time available to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, based on the timing.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I know that I absolutely adored going to Pass Forward last year. So many good connections, great sessions. I also don't want to take all the funds to be like, I want to go again. I am not available for places this year, unfortunately. And I also agree it's way too hot to be in Florida. But I do think those two conferences would be the ones to focus on should we be allocating funds to conferences.
Agreed.
So we should check with Andy and Julie.
Yes.
Who did I miss? No, John.
I know. Yeah, I think that's everyone. And
Yeah,
Andy, if I remember right, has not, expressed real strong desire, but we should take these comments and then circle back with Julie and Andy.
I mean, if neither Julie or Andy's interested in the national conference,
I think we can get up to a lot of mischief in New Orleans.
And I'm always interested in the Places Conference if it's, local, if it happens, it's available. It's usually a great meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
But if they are going to continually focus on Historic Preservation 101, I don't know if I need to go.
Yeah, it's hard when you combine Main Street and historic preservation together.
It is really difficult. I commend them for doing it. So that's just was my thing.
I was looking at the New Orleans conference, but we have so many other travel. It was like squished in between other stuff. And
yeah.
My husband's like.
Exactly. All right. So what I'm hearing is we'll follow up with Andy and Julie and get back to this, but the Florida is out. And
so that was the most urgent one in terms.
That was the most urgent one.
Yeah, too hot.
Awesome. Wonderful.
If you give us $5,000 more, it's still too hot.
It's really warm.
I mean, even when Julie went, it was in
a DC.
Ohio.
No, it was Ohio. It was
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, and it was hot.
Excellent.
One I was going to go to at one point.
So, Morgan, we're saying strong yes for Pass Forward for you.
She's already registered.
Already registered.
Well, I know the registration. Oh, sorry.
She's already.
The registration is not open yet.
Yeah.
But I got the hotel.
But you're planning on it.
Yeah.
Do we need to vote to approve? I don't know that we do. We don't usually.
We didn't vote last conference.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good with that.
I'm good with Morgan.
I think, were you asking for a vote to spend the money towards conferences?
I don't even know that you need to do that.
Yeah, you don't need to do that. To vote to spend money that's already been budgeted for you.
Ollie's like, I'm out.
Hi, Holly.
No, I mean, I just don't think you need to do that.
All right, so we got a plan.
Okay. So we'll
spend it. We promise.
You will spend it on conferences.
Great.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like us to consider, that we can talk about at the next meeting because
you don't want to add on to it.
Short.
All right.
I have a thought.
Thoughts, we can hold them though. Commission announcements and events. I have a few quick updates to run through really quickly. First, we would like to remind everyone that chair and vice chair elections will be held next meeting or the meeting after, that's coming up. And that any member wishing to be considered should submit a letter of intent to Bart and Susan by the end of the month. Next, Chair Bond has asked the group to discuss the agenda items for the upcoming meeting and whether the July meeting is necessary. If so, who would attend, as it's going to be on July 3rd. Do we have the agenda items for July's meeting?
Probably not.
Well, we just have the IBR.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
There's no city.
That's informational, it's not a hearing. So mainly we need to know if there's any hearings coming from the city.
No hearings.
He's like,
well, that you know of, right?
Yeah, but at this point, it would almost be impossible if we had received something to prepare it in time to make agenda deadlines, so I'm saying no.
And the county,
Executive decision.
and we have even a longer turnaround because we need a full 30 days for a full,
So you don't have anything in the pipeline either.
not for county certificates of appropriateness, no.
All right. Okay. So shall we make a motion to forego the July 3rd meeting? None of you hear
So
that?
moved.
I'll second that.
All right.
I'm
do we
always
need
on
to
such
vote
a
on this
delay,
or
it's
can
not worth it. I can't, it's hard for me to second.
I know, I keep looking up at the screen, John, thinking I'm going to see your face, and all I see is like an agenda.
I can tile that on there.
Yeah, I mean,
Clutters the screen.
All right.
That would help.
So, pass a motion to not hold a July 3rd meeting.
correct.
All right. Do we need to vote on that?
And then when we hear about said nominations or whatever they are, recommendations that are going to the 18th, the appointments on the 18th,
So just email.
email us.
Right, that's not something that's an action item, that's
Right.
already in the pipeline.
No, that's just for some people who
Yes.
want to know what they
Yes.
should be up to
Yes,
when
that
they're
would,
in their off time.
some people would be the first people to know.
Okay.
And,
If those people were to know anything at all.
Correct. Thank you.
Excellent.
No July meeting.
No July meeting. All right, final item of note that I have, staff and Brad Richards would like to remind the group about the Washington Museum Association Annual Conference. It is at the Hilton, June 12th through 14th. The HPC has co-sponsored the event, and it's hosted by the Clark County Historical Museum. There are several event passes available and the opportunity to host a table at the event. How many event passes are available?
there are,
3. Excellent. Shall we just have anyone who's interested email you?
I think
When
that'd
was
be
this
the
again?
easiest. It's next week, the Thursday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
At the-
I'll
at
be
the
in Washington
Hilton.
DC at the Nationals with my students, so I'm out.
Oh,
Congratulations on nationals.
yes, good luck. So all I wanted to add, because I spoke with Brad informally this week, and he reminded me about this, is that we can share the passes. You know, somebody doesn't have to come in and grab it. So, if you want to just go for part of the day, maybe you can email us or however you want to do it.
Yeah.
Because he wants us to use them, and we have a table. I mean, Susan and I are,
Yeah, what are you gonna, I mean, we're a regulatory agency. It's not like we're gonna, I mean, what would you put at a table?
information. I mean, it's up to us if we want to spend the time on it.
Yes, John?
I don't know. I know I was briefly talking about like highlighting History Day. I do have a team that's not going that might be able to do something, but I'm not 100% sure. It's the team that's been working with Brad and the museum specifically around local Vancouver history and the Red Scare in Vancouver. I don't know if it's worth our effort to have something set up or not. I don't know if the girls can do it or not either. So I will check with them tomorrow if you all are interested in possibly having them set up their exhibit on the table.
Yeah, I mean, why don't you check with them and get back to us? My only concern would be that's not HPC specifically, it's something else, but.
Right. Plus it is during school.
Is it, or is school out by then?
Nope. School isn't out yet.
School's still in session, but one of them's a senior, so she'll be graduated already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't,
It's at the Hilton, which means they gotta pay. They gotta get, pay for parking or get reimbursed for parking.
Complicated.
there are issues. Why don't you just even see whether there's interest, John, and you know how to contact us.
Sounds good. So we'll get it figured out, and we'll email Bart and Susan if we're interested in the passes.
I mean, the only couple sessions I wanted, one of them is Julie and, Sean, and Priority.
Right, yeah, sometimes that's a little tricky.
All right, subcommittee updates and announcements. Next, we'll hear any updates from the subcommittees. Design review, any notes?
You know what? We are still working on it.
Good.
And we're, about 2/3 of the way through the pages.
Very impressive.
But, yeah, and they go live as we get them done, so look at the website.
Yeah, no, I looked at the website today and I always notice changes.
It looks
Yeah, it does.
Logging away.
Fantastic. Demolition?
Quick update. So we met with Brad a while back. The museum's going to be the storing facility for the pictures. We're still working on preferred format, but we have updated our demolition application to include listing the date of the building, and then there's a process for which then staff would need to go into GIS and confirm that. So if it is 50 years or older, then we would require photo documentation. So we're close.
Yeah,
I think.
Fantastic.
And hopefully the county's going to follow suit.
I mean, that's up to.
I was hoping that the county would follow suit and kind of update their demolition application to be similar, to not confuse people.
I think we need to bring in community development on that. And so Susan has more experience with that side of the office than I do.
We can certainly talk to community development and the building official about changing the requirements for the demolition application.
Because I think there's enough storage space for the county also at the museum. I don't think we have to find another repository.
Yeah, and once the city's already figured it out, it should be relatively simple for the county to adopt. Although one of the hangups we're having with the website right at the moment is the city, all the city stuff is online, and the county, like the application to nominate your property is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And one's completely online. So we'll sort it out.
Excellent. And finally, outreach.
John, were you going to talk about the CLG? Oh, no, that's a different committee. Sorry.
Different. Yeah, Andy and I really haven't connected. I'll be honest, I've been so swamped with end of school and everything going on that that's my goal when I get back from nationals and everything next week, is to sit down with him and talk that out and everything. So no real updates as of right now.
Sounds great. And the 2024 CLG Grant Proposal Temporary Subcommittee. I see that there's a DAP presentation on June 28th. Any additional?
I wasn't aware when we submitted it, but I guess there's a pitch meeting. So.
Yeah, yeah, there's a pitch.
Remind me again what the grant application is?
It's for to hire a consultant for updating design review guidelines for
our registered property.
Awesome.
So using the existing inventory as a template to create realistic guidelines that have more detail than the national inventory standards. And it was very thorough, and the application, this is the same one we've been talking about for several months.
Okay.
Sounds good.
But now we have to make Michelle said we had to do a presentation.
It's online.
It is online. Apparently there was a lot of interest this year, and our ask was healthy. So
right.
Who knows?
All right. Any questions or discussions from the commissioners regarding these points? I'm seeing none. Then we will move on to for the good of the order. Are there any comments for the good of the order? I have one. Commissioner Mandler Huff gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Woo! Robert Henry Huff, that's the last name, is back at home recovering well, as is Commissioner Mandler Huff.
Excellent. This is great news.
Yep. John has his hand up for another good of the order.
Yeah, well, so just, we're going, we have some great local historians, young historians here. And a side note, even though she didn't make it to nationals, the Washington State teen historian is one of my students who's graduating. So the top historian in all of Washington State is right here in Vancouver. So that's pretty cool.
Wow, that's fantastic. Great. Congratulations to you and her. All right, with no other comments, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
Excellent. With that, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. No, it's not.
Aye.
Yes, sorry, I apologize. I'm still learning this. Do we all, yes. Everyone, all in favor of ending the meeting? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
dissenting? Excellent, no dissenting. All right, and with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.
Thank you.